Most people build Airtable bases the hard way. They open up a table, start typing fields, and just hope it all works out. But the truth is, the biggest mistakes happen before you even create a single table. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use AI. Not Airtable's built-in Omni, but tools like ChatGPT or Claude to design a cleaner, more scalable Airtable database before you ever even start building in Airtable. We are going to walk through 5 questions that you should ask AI every time before you start building in Airtable. And to make this more practical, we're going to use a real-life example, and I'm going to take you through the exact steps. We're going to take this example through the different questions. I will be sharing my screen and showing you exactly what we get from ChatGPT, and then helping you take that information to interpret a better Airtable design from each question. By the end of the video, you will have a repeatable framework that helps you build smarter, more efficient databases in Airtable. So if that's of interest, stick around and let's get into it. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth and this is Gap Consulting. It's our mission to help you unlock the full potential of Airtable and related no-code tools. And in this video, as I said, we're going to be jumping into ChatGPT to frame our database before we even open up Airtable. If you follow the steps that I present here, it's going to help you save a ton of time on your next Airtable builds because you won't have a lot of rework that you might have if you just started building without thinking the process all the way through. Now, before I get into the heart of the video, I first want to invite you to join me for some training. I've put together my Airtable crash course that is going to help you get up and running in Airtable quickly. It goes through all the key features of the software, and when you learn to leverage all of them in harmony, you're going to get better, smarter databases. So grab that free crash course at gapconsulting.io/Airtable-crash-course. We'll send it right to your inbox and you can start learning the key fundamentals. But without further ado, let's hop on into my screen, and I've already started my prompt with ChatGPT. Now, for starters, I'm giving the AI tool context as to what we're doing. So here I've said, you're an Airtable solutions architect. I'm designing a database in Airtable to track office equipment inventory. So our example is I'm tracking things like laptops, monitors, etc., and who has them within our organization. All right, back to the prompt. We're doing this for employees. Each item is a finite asset that can be checked out and checked back in. And we need to, and then here's a little bit of a list, a little bullet point. We need to track who currently has each item, track the history of check-ins and checkouts, see how long items have been checked out, support onboarding new hires with assigned equipment, handle returns, lost damage items, and the retirement of assets. Now, for the big part, I'm going to ask you a series of questions to help me design the database before I start building it. When you answer, think specifically in terms of Airtable's tables, fields, relationships, and automations. So this is your kind of teed up prompt. I've not even gotten into the questions yet. Now, I do want to add that the more context you can share in this ChatGPT thread or whatever AI tool you're using, the better your outputs are going to be. So obviously I've put together just a bit here, but if you were to share more information, you're going to get better results. And a key tip that we use in our consulting firm is we record all of our calls. And from those calls that we record, we get transcripts, and we can upload those transcripts for even more context with our AI tools. So anything that you have that would help support AI to help you build a better, smarter database, share that up front. That's going to be your key tip. That's a little bonus because, like I said, we haven't even gotten to the questions yet. So now you can see that AI basically confirms this. ChatGPT says, cool, I'm with you. We're going to do this the Airtable way. And here's what I'm thinking so far, but I'm going to wait for more direction from you. So now let's drop into our first question. Question 1 is all about lifecycle and workflow. So I've pasted it in here, and go ahead and just type this out in your own brainstorming. What is the core workflow or lifecycle of this equipment tracking process? So we are asking ChatGPT to break it into clear stages from the moment we acquire an item through assigning it to an employee, etc. So then I'm again calling out with some bullet points. For each stage, I want you to list the main goal of the stage, who is involved, and what events or data changes we should track in Airtable. So let's pose the question to ChatGPT. Now, it should normally take between 10 and 40 seconds or so. And here we go. We're getting our output. So ChatGPT is confirming we're starting from a good place and telling us stage 1, acquire and register an asset. And so here you can see that it's mapping out for us, forcing us to frame our thinking in a way that will really help us build a better solution. So you can see here, stage 1 has a goal: get every physical item into Airtable as a unique asset. Who is involved? IT/ops. We've got optionally finance and purchasing in here, what to track in Airtable. So it's starting to put tables together for us. And this is where ChatGPT is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Now, the reason I like going to a third-party tool and not doing this directly in Airtable's Omni is because I can have this dialogue before I get to actually build. And Omni seems that it's always ready to build the next thing and get moving forward. And I really want to think through the process first. So here we are, what to track in Airtable, assets or equipment. You can see the key events here. And then we talk about stage 2, prep and make available, where the goal is to prepare the asset for use. So this is another step in our process. Our third step or stage is to assign and check out assets to an employee, which is included within onboarding, where we formally assign the asset to an employee. Stage 4 here, in use day-to-day tracking, goal, who has what, where is it, and for how long. So basically we want to understand where everything is, where all the assets are. And then lastly, we have our return and check-in goal here is to capture the return of the item. And I guess I jumped the gun. We're not lastly. We have stage 6, issues with lost, stolen, or damaged inventory. This is one of those things that I wouldn't have thought about. Genuinely, I would have failed to think about this in my initial build had I not been talking to AI. So this allows us to really think about the entire process, the 30,000 foot view of it. Because this is one of those areas where had we kind of skipped over lost, stolen, or damaged goods, we might have been fine for a year, but then suddenly we would have to go back in and update our database, and it makes it not very scalable. So now we have purposely and properly thought through that. We have the repair and service stage, we have the retirement disposal, and then, oh wow, periodic audit. Another thing I would not have considered, but yeah, we do need the ability to audit our list and make sure that is this stuff where it should be. So this is just in our first prompt already, a ton of information that we're getting from AI, multiple different opportunities here that I would have missed on my own if I were building this without thinking through the entire process first. Now it's time for us to give AI the second question, and this is where we're going to take this workflow that we've identified and really start to turn it into Airtable related items. We want this to be tables and fields, and so with that, I'm going to paste in my second question. Based on that life cycle, what are the main objects, tables, that we should track in Airtable, and how do they relate to each other? This is a key anytime you're building an Airtable, especially if you're new to databases, because most of us don't naturally think in terms of data objects. And we're asking ChatGPT to help us frame our thinking specifically around a database structure. And we're calling out that we want to list each table that we need. We want to describe what records represent in that table and describe the key relationships between the different tables. Is it a one-to-many, a many-to-many? We want this all from ChatGPT in plain language. Again, if you're newer to Airtable, you might not be familiar with these terms, one-to-many, many-to-many. This will come over time as you build within the software. Or grab that crash course that I mentioned at the top of the video because we cover all of the basics in that crash course. But let's now pose that to ChatGPT and see what comes back. Again, our main goal here is to start to understand the data schema, the framework that we're going to build in Airtable. And this is exactly what we're getting back. A table first for employees. What a record represents, one employee who can be assigned. Second record or second table is assets or equipment. This is a physical item that you can touch and assign. Next, we have our table of checkouts. This is a transaction or a history table. And this is really the heart, as ChatGPT says, of who has what, since when, and for how long. So this is really telling us how to build this thing. We have our optional onboarding table here. This is representative of an onboarding event. So for example, a kit for a new hire or a role change. You know, if you go from one job to another within our organization, what different inventory items have to change within your possession for you to do your new job? This is handled in the optional onboarding. We've got incidents. This is, again, one of those optional components, one of those areas that I would not have thought about had we not gone through our first question. But what happens when something occurs, right? If there's a lost or stolen inventory item, how do we handle that? That's going to be tracked in our incidents table. We've also got repairs. We've got vendors, another optional table. We've got audits, another optional table. So all of this is taking the workflow that we identified with our first question and then putting it into Airtable terms. Each one of these is a table that we would create as a new tab inside of Airtable. And more importantly, or equally importantly, we then figure out how these things relate. And this is where ChatGPT is breaking it down for us here in the relationships component of each table. So if we look at the onboarding as an example, it says one onboarding case, one employee, is usually one-to-one for a new hire, but you can allow multiple cases for a person over time. So this would basically mean that one individual can connect to multiple onboarding instances. So we would have a one-to-many relationship. And we're building a link between our employee table and our onboarding table to facilitate that data transfer. That is all getting spelled out for us with our second question. Now for question number 3, we want to get an understanding of what information we are tracking for each object. So we've identified our different tables or objects with our second question. Now we need to get an understanding of what's going to be included in that table. So I've put together here question 3 for the key tables, and specifically calling out which those are. So here we've got assets, asset types, employees, and movements. But if I were being more precise, I would go in and take exactly what ChatGPT said here. Employees, assets. And again, I'm looking for the core tables here. Checkouts or asset activity, right? And possibly onboarding. So I'm calling that out here in my prompt, and I'm saying, what are the essential fields for these things? Now, because I'm copying and pasting this, I actually don't want to include the asset types. I think it makes more sense to just have assets. So we're just kind of simplifying things a little bit, but I'm basically saying, hey, I need you to tell me, what are we tracking in these tables? So for each table, please list essential fields with recommended Airtable field types, optional nice-to-have fields, and any fields that are better as formulas or lookups rather than typed manually. Now, that last note there is really going to save you a lot of time if you're new to Airtable. I have done so many databases in Airtable now that when I start building, I instinctively know this should be a formula, this should be a single select, this should be a roll-up. But if you're new to Airtable and you don't have the experience yet of having done hundreds and maybe thousands of different fields, well then this kind of a question will really go a long way because ChatGPT is going to spell it all out for us. Every single table with the associated fields, and let us kind of plan that out, put it in our brains and kind of mull it over for a while. And here we're even seeing examples tied into most of our components. So for the assets table, calling out that we need assets, the type of the asset, the life cycle status, the current holder, when we purchased it, how much we purchased it for, do we have a unique ID? Maybe it's got some kind of tag or barcode, serial number, and then a list of nice to haves, and then good candidates for formulas and lookups. So these are not manually entered data points, right? They're calculated. So is it currently checked out? Well, that depends on what we have in the other components of our database. So again, this allows us to start to see how these different tables track information and gives us an additional layer in how they interrelate. And we're again looking at the key tables here. That is the assets themselves, the employees table, and for our example, the asset movements. So the rentals or the checkouts, however we call that table. So it's, again, the history. So this is giving us a great breakdown and even in some cases giving us formulas to put in so that we can just get up and running that much more quickly in our solution when we start to build. But we're not there yet. Now it's time for question 4. And with this question, we're going to go deeper into Airtable to figure out what are those components that we can automate. Because automation is a huge part of Airtable. We want to know with any solution that we build how we're going to automate it. So here is my question. Based on this design, what automations and logic would you recommend? Please separate suggestions into, here's an important key takeaway, native Airtable formulas and rollups. These are not technically automations. These are calculated fields. They are giving us an output based on how things are interrelated in our system. The other one, native Airtable automations. So we're breaking these out into two separate things and saying, do I need to build an automation, or is this a formula or a rollup field where I inherit information or knowledge about something in my database? Optional external tools, Zapier and or Make or N8N. There are many different third-party automation tools that you might use. And the reason we're calling this out separately is because Airtable automations, while quite robust, and they've grown a lot over the last few years, they don't do everything yet. Sometimes you have to go outside the Airtable environment for a more advanced automation. So here we go. We call out these different groups, and then we say we want to focus on keeping the current holder accurate, calculating how long items have been checked out, and reminding us about overdue returns. So we're really just calling out, for our example, these are the things that we know that we want to do from the beginning with this solution. So we send that through, and within a few seconds, we get this back. So our first component here is native Airtable formulas and rollups. So this is where we're going to know if something is available or not. So we're looking at the asset movements. We're figuring out, when it was checked out, figure out if it is either checked out or checked in. Like, is it in someone's possession or is it in the library, so to speak? We also want to do a formula for how many days has it been checked out. An overdue flag. So if we had an expected return date and it's currently past that, we want a flag to tell us, hey, this is not where it's expected. Then in our assets, we might want to see things like the current holder, the current checkout record helper, the days with the current holder, the total lifetime checkouts. So again, these are all formulas or rollups or lookups, and it's telling us in our structure here what these different field types are. So if it's a rollup, and if it is, what are we rolling up, and how do we get it to give us the calculation we're looking for? Now we get down to our second section, native Airtable automations. So the first one here is keeping the current holder accurate and statuses aligned. So it's an automation that when a new checkout is created, we enforce uniqueness. Interesting. So when a record is created in the asset movements where the checkout is empty and it's open, and so, here we go. It's giving us step by step what this automation will do. We will optionally validate it, and then we will update the linked asset. We have another automation for when an asset is returned. So it says because the current holder is a rollup field, it will automatically clear it once the movement closes. So you see how we've got these automations that are working in tandem with our formulas now. And again, we haven't even started building. This is all just given to us based on prompts because we've gone through the diligence of thinking it through. Now, don't skip Section 3, because this is where automations get even more powerful, more robust. We're talking about automations with Zapier and Make in this case, Slack notifications for overdue or long-running assets. To be perfectly honest, this automation can be built in Airtable. Airtable does have a native integration with Slack in its automations, so we don't need to build this with a third-party tool, but I'm glad that it's calling it out still. We could DM the employee in Slack or Teams instead of email. Also possible to do in Airtable automations. Periodic reporting. Okay, we've got some dashboards that we could build. I don't think we need third-party automation for this, but still. And then we've got our integration with ticketing tools. So here's a great call out, right? If we're using Jira, Linear, Help Desk, this is where a Zapier might come into play, or make.com, because we can now get our information in Airtable synced up or integrated with these other third-party tools, other software that we might use for this very purpose. If you took these answers right now and started building, you would not be wrong. But before we wrap it, we're going to do one final question, which in some ways I think is possibly one of the most important, because it's all about figuring out how can we future-proof this thing. And so here's the question. What edge cases and future scenarios should we consider for this inventory system so we don't paint ourselves into a corner? This is where scalability comes into play, because if you don't ask this question, you very likely will create a solution that might be great for a year, maybe 4 years, but at some point it might start to break down for you if you don't ask this question up front. So I strongly recommend not sleeping on this one. Make sure that you ask it. And even if you don't love the answer, at least you're aware of what's coming or could possibly be coming in the future so that you can hedge against it. So here we go. Assignment and movement edge cases. An asset could accidentally get checked out twice. So how do we solve for that? Well, here are some recommended tweaks. ChatGPT has put together some options for us so that we can avoid this kind of breakdown. Another one, a direct transfer between employees. Maybe a laptop goes directly from employee A to employee B without going back to IT or being in stock. How would we design for that? Next, partial returns from a kit, right? If we have a kit that we send out, let's say it consists of 5 things, somebody returns 2 of the things but keeps 3. How do we prepare for an edge case like that? So again, recommendations. So you can see that we're getting a lot of feedback here from ChatGPT. Now, maybe all of this is not critical and we can still build without it. But as I said, it's great to be aware of what might be coming in the future so that we can just plan for that and build a better database accordingly. So I know that this video was very different from our typical ones because, again, we didn't even look at Airtable. But I guarantee if you follow the framework that we've established here, you are going to get massively more efficient and more scalable databases that require less rework and get you faster results. I hope you got a ton of value from this video, and if you did, we'd love a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you have questions that we didn't quite address here, swing by our website because we have a ton of resources available, not to mention complimentary strategy calls to help you build your next Airtable base. That's it for this one. Most importantly, my friends, keep on building.